Somewhere in America today, a student, a family, a church, or even a big or small business is facing a choice: follow the commands of faith and conscience, or act in a way contrary to those beliefs. And all too often, those same people and organizations are now being charged with crimes or receiving penalties for choosing to act consistently with their faith over a community ordinance or state or federal law. So where do they go for help? How do they find someone willing to take their case? Perhaps even more important, what kind of an attorney do you want speaking on your behalf? Tonight, our guest is someone who has made it his life's work to defend religious freedom and the right of conscience in America's courtrooms. Stay with us. What happens in a school, church, or other setting where change comes in conflict with conviction when your job or reputation is tested? Well, those are the stories that often register as tremors indicating an earthquake is coming. A heated school board meeting, a protest at the town hall, or a public figure losing a contract or watching book sales plummet. These are the cracks in our communities that become the lead stories in our social media feeds or cable news shows. But if you're like me, you're often confused about the right way to respond. Do we fight back? File a lawsuit? Engage a PR firm? What does it look like to challenge justice without just adding to the noise and confusion? Jeremy Samek has been helping fellow Christians understand what it means to seek the good of the city or community where we live, to not be defeated and depressed or lose what it means to be a true follower of Jesus. He's the senior counsel at Independence Law Center, and he's my special guest tonight on tonight's show. Jeremy, welcome to State of Independence. Tell our viewers a little bit about your journey, which includes military service, marriage, and also some beautiful children.
Yeah, so I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My dad was a small business owner, and when I was driving to work with him one day, we heard on the news a case. I can't even remember what it was about, but it was a religious liberty type of case. And I sat there just entranced that that kind of stuff could be happening in America, where some student or some small business owner was being told that he couldn't operate based on the dictates of his conscience. And that, I didn't have any attorneys in my family. I didn't really even know any attorneys. And so that really catapulted me on a trajectory to want to do that kind of work and protect those type of people. So I ended up going to Liberty University. I graduated in 2003 and joined the debate team because I thought, what better way to become an attorney than to join the debate team. Had a wonderful education there, went to the University of Pittsburgh. I met my wife at Liberty.
Very nice.
And she and I have 5 children now, from 18 down to the age of 8.
Yeah. So, and they break down how? 4 boys?
Yeah, we have 4 boys and then a little girl.
A little girl. And your little girl is adopted?
Yes, yeah, we adopted her when she was 2 years old. She was living in an orphanage in Armenia. She has special needs. She has Down syndrome, and so we were able to bring her into our family 6 years ago now. Wonderful addition. Has 4 big brothers that keep her occupied, and she keeps them occupied.
How about her birth parents? How do they regard? How did she end up in an orphanage?
Yeah, we actually were able to contact her birth parents after the adoption was complete, and discovered that she was put into the orphanage solely because she had Down syndrome. And so it was an unfortunate situation, but when we did contact her and him, the mother didn't really want anything to do with it. The father did, and so we communicate a few times a year. But he put us in contact with his sister, who lives in California, who speaks English, and who's a believer. And she was told that Maria had died. And she was ecstatic to find out that she was alive. And so we got to go out to California and meet her and spend some time with her and her uncle and her 2 biological cousins. So it was a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, so it takes a lot of love. I mean, I know we have a lot of people viewing tonight who are Christian people, and a lot of them have their own biological children. They probably never thought about adopting, especially somebody adopting a kid from another country with special needs. Where does that come from in you and your wife that you did that?
Yeah, my both of our parents were interested in the adoption process. They never went through with it. And before we even got married, we talked about wanting to get into foster care, just provide some of the resources that we have to people in need and open our home. And so we did that for a little bit in foster care when we had some young children. But it's not for everybody. It's definitely a calling. But I think a lot of us have room and space, and sometimes it doesn't feel like we have space or room, but you do it anyways because we want to just show that love and open our homes to those.
When I was
who
a
need it.
stranger, you took me in. That's one of the things that Matthew in the 25th chapter talks about, that Jesus talks about.
That's right.
That love in your heart that because you follow Christ is wonderful and special. I think it's important for people to know. There are a lot of lawyers who are professing Christians, but it's great for people to know your story and to know that you have that kind of love in your heart as a believer, and that for you, being a believer isn't just a badge that you wear. Where you say, well, yeah, I'm a Christian, or I've been a member of XYZ church for 20 years. It's something that you live every day.
Right.
And Christ is who you follow, and the love of Christ is in your heart.
Yeah, amen. And one of the things that my wife and I always say is sometimes people will put folks that adopt kids with special needs on a pedestal and call you saints or something like that. And we always say, we're not. We were adopted in God's family, and so we're just called to do the same and follow His example.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, I'm just so grateful for you and your wife and for what you're doing for your daughter, and that you've shown her, opened your home and shown her that love. And I know she's prospering under you. She's been with you for what, 6 years now?
Yeah, 6 years. Yep. She just started school about 2 or 3 days ago. So
that's awesome.
Seeing her go off on that bus for the first time, we homeschooled her all the way up until 2nd grade, and so just 3 days ago, seeing her go on that bus is a little tough.
Yeah, it's a little tough. Some tears probably.
But exciting
I'm sure.
too. Exciting too.
Yeah, that's great. So we've got people watching tonight who are concerned. Where do you draw the line? You're a Christian person. Maybe you have a small business. Somebody makes an ask of you that you don't feel that you can live with as a Christian person. And what do you do about that? I mean.
Yeah. Well, one of the great things about our nation is we were founded on this idea that there's a higher authority over government, that our government leaders were instituted by that higher authority being God. And so we have a structure set up in place where people can follow the dictates of their conscience when there is a conflict. And so it comes up in a variety of circumstances. Most recently, we just got a wonderful Supreme Court victory in the case of Gerald Groff, who was a post office letter carrier, who was a missionary prior to joining the post office. And the denomination that he's a part of is very strict about Sabbath, following the Sabbath and not working on the Sabbath. And he joined the post office because they didn't deliver mail on Sundays. And he was very close. He was maybe about a month or two away from being able to reach a seniority status where he would not have had to deliver mail on Saturday or Sunday. But in order to get that, he would have had to start delivering on Sundays because Amazon came in and they required Sunday deliveries, and the post office entered into that contract. And so instead of just violating his conscience for those few months, he asked to be moved to a different post office who wasn't doing that Sunday delivery at the time. And when he moved, eventually those Amazon contracts caught up to everyone, and they started delivering on Sundays as well. And he would do everything in his power. He would work double shifts during the weekdays. On Saturday, he would work every holiday that didn't fall on a Sunday to try to accommodate his fellow employees. But eventually the post office said, no, we're not going to do it anymore. And so it really went down to legal issues with what statutory language says. One of the great results, we'll just fast forward to the end, is that we were able to overturn essentially a 46-year precedent. And so now employers should be trying to accommodate somebody unless it creates an undue hardship on the business. Prior to this time, they interpreted it as being something more than a de minimis. Yeah. And I know I'm not a Latin expert by any stretch, but de minimis more than de minimis means very, very little burden on the employer. So now employers have to make some effort to help them. We just, 8 years ago, we won another Supreme Court case that helped the religious rights of the employer themselves. And so we protect both the employer, the employee, and students in schools as well.
That's great. Does it cost a lot of money? I mean, did he have to spend a lot of money to get you to help him?
Yeah, no. So everything that we do is free of charge. It's pro bono. We're completely a donation-driven organization. And so the first time that he called me, that was one of the concerns, is that people are in difficult situations. They don't always have that extra income to be able to hire high-powered attorneys that are in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh to help them out on these issues. And so by God's grace, we've been able to provide all of our services free of charge. There was a really interesting situation a few years back where we had done a case, and we can talk about this, but it was a school Bible club. And they wanted to put up a sign in their school saying when their Bible club met, like every other club in this school. And they were permitted to do that, but they had a Bible verse on the bottom. It was Mark 16, verse 15, go into all the world and preach the good news to all of creation. And the principal told them, you can put the sign up, but you have to take that Bible verse down. We can't have a Bible verse up in the hallway. And that principal was mistaken. He was mistaken school speech for student speech, and this was an instance of student speech. And so we wrote them a letter, and it wasn't a letter saying, hey, we're going to sue the pants off of you unless you do what we say, but we really try to approach it in an amicable way. We're trying to help. Here's the case law, here's the status, and we think this is how it ought to be done. And they did. They rescinded that, and they said, you know what, go ahead and you're allowed to put up the sign. A few months later, they asked to have a table in the cafeteria that student clubs were allowed to reserve, and they said, yeah, you can do that. They told them what they were going to do at the table. They were going to have a poster, and this was right around Thanksgiving time, where kids could come up and write down what they're thankful for. It said, like, the students in the school are thankful for, and then they would write something down. And when they did that, they would offer them a little New Testament Bible that the students had saved up their money and purchased about 100 New Testament Bibles. Now, they never brought them in. They just made the request like they were required to do. And the response from the principal was, you can have the table and you can have the poster, but you're not allowed to hand out Bibles on school property during the school day, except for 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after school in the public sidewalk bordering school property. Now, the law is such that if you or I wanted to go into the public sidewalk bordering school property to talk to people or hand out Bibles, we can do that. But telling the students that they couldn't do that, and even worse, that they couldn't hand out Bibles to their friends during the school day, was a violation of their rights. And so we approached it in the same manner. We said, hey, we heard that this happened. We think that it's wrong. And for whatever reason, the school dug their heels in and said, we're not going to change. We're not going to change that. And so we have these conversations with the students. You don't want to. Litigation is a last option, right? It's never fun to have to get into those waters. But they were willing to do that because they knew that there are students in junior high school and elementary school that can benefit from that teaching opportunity that you have. And so during that process, we ended up winning. We ended up having to go to court. Before that, we went to the school board and said, hey, school board, here's what's happening. You may not hear all the story. You may not hear both sides, but we want to give you this perspective and hear what this side of the story is.
What did the school board say?
The school board sat quiet, and afterwards they determined that they were going to stick to their guns and they were going to prohibit passing out Bibles during the school day. And one of the problems with that, number one, is it violates the Constitution to have that heavy of restrictions on any sort of handing out materials. You can have reasonable time and place and manner restrictions, but that wasn't what they were relying on. The other problem was that they weren't actually following their own practice when it came to handing out other materials. They allowed other student groups to hand out materials from the very same table just a month before. And so, we had to go to court, and we ended up being successful, victorious, and we were able to rewrite their policies. But not only that, the ripple effect of the faithfulness of these students went to 50 other school districts in Pennsylvania who had the same policy. We discovered that this was actually a written administrative regulation that this school had. We had our interns do research on the 500-something school districts in Pennsylvania and found that there were 50 of them that had similar or identical policies. And so we were able to get those 50 other policies changed because of that. Yeah. And so I wanted to back up to the point where I was talking about the cost. Because of the news media and the attention that case got, there were families in other places in the state who ended up calling us, not knowing how the fee structures are arranged, how it's completely free, but they said, I have a second grader, and we had worked on, it was Valentine's Day, and we had worked on making handmade Valentines that are little cutouts of hearts and handwritten said, roses are red, violets are blue, someone loves you, here's a clue, John 3:16. And the day of the Valentine's Day party, the kid was passing them out into the little box like they do in the classroom, and the mom received a call from the principal, and the principal said, your child was handing out this religious material, and the teacher saw that and confiscated them, went through and took all of these Valentines that were passed out. We can't hand out this type of material in a public school. And she said, I saw this article, and I don't have any money, so I can't I can't handle this. I don't know how to do it. But I'm just wondering, was it right? Are they right? Are you not allowed to do this? Because what they had offered her was, we'll let her go back, this student go back and pass out the Valentines, but we're going to cut off John 3:16.
Wow.
So it'll have the poem, and the mom said, I don't feel right about that. It's not going to look like a heart, and there's no clue.
Yeah.
I don't know, they're going to think my kid loves them. Or what.
Yeah.
So it's kind of confusing. So she declined that, but we were able to get involved. So we contacted the school, ended up talking to the solicitor, which is the attorney for the school, provided him a lot of resources and case law and explanation. And he said, you know what, I'm so glad that you reached out to us, because I represent a number of other school districts here in Pennsylvania, and I know some of them are doing similar things. So I'm going to make sure that they're doing the right thing too. So these students at this one Central Pennsylvania high school who took a step of faith, and when they did that, it wasn't without rocks being thrown at them, even from people in the churches. There was lots of misinformation about the case circulating online, and there were a number of people, including pastors of churches, some Christian, some not, that came out to speak against students passing out Bibles in schools. And you know how social media is these days, and that's tough. That's tough for anybody, but it's especially tough for high school kids to be the subject of attention like that. But because of their faithfulness, number one, their personal faith grew. Their personal strength and courage grew through that. But the impact on students across Pennsylvania had ripple effects that they could have never anticipated.
That's amazing. I mean, what a great story, and what wonderful students, what wonderful young Christian people to stand like that. It's hard. It's always easy to stand in the sunlight when everybody's on your side and cheering you. It's much harder to stand when people are booing you or are against you, and it's raining outside, and you're outside catching the rain. It's very, very hard to stand in those circumstances. So my heart goes out to those young people who had the courage to stand and who had the strength of conviction to stand and to not be deterred, and look at what their faith produced.
Right.
Just a blessing. Well, this is helpful because for people watching, they want to know, how can I mean, if I have an issue like this that, I think is significant to me, but maybe small in the scope of things, and I don't have the money to do anything about it, what can I do? And you've just told them exactly what they can do.
Yeah.
They can reach out to your law center.
Yeah, you can reach out to Independence Law Center at independencelaw.org. So independencelaw.org, and also pafamily.org as well. And so if that's a case that we can take, then we gladly take it. But we have lots of allies around the state and around the nation.
How many lawyers do you have working at the center?
We have 4 attorneys that are working at our law center here in Harrisburg, but we have numerous allied attorneys across the state that work in private practice or their own law practice that will join in and help as well. And we often work with national organizations like Alliance Defending Freedom and First Liberty on cases that have national importance as well.
Right, and you're saying that no case is too small. In other words, like this mother who had the Valentine's Day handouts. That's not too small an issue for you.
No, absolutely not. And look, at the end of the day, the whole purpose for why we exist is to try to keep the door open for the gospel in Pennsylvania and our nation. Everything that we do is directed towards that, is to glorifying God, but keeping the door for the gospel open so that not only pastors, but also all the lay people in the church, whether it's at the water cooler at their business, in their interaction with customers, or students and teachers in their interaction with each other, can have those opportunities to be able to share the love of Christ with others around them.
Amen, amen. When we return, I want to ask Jeremy to share a story or two that might surprise us, an insight that defies headlines and gives us hope. He's already shared some. Stay with us.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
His name is attorney Jeremy Samek, senior counsel at Independence Law Center, a public interest civil rights law firm working to preserve religious liberty, promote marriage and family, protect human life, and improve schools. Jeremy, I think there are a lot of people who might believe that no matter what you do, the world 40 years from now will leave America unrecognizable. But I don't hear any panic in your voice. What gives you hope?
Yeah, I think what gives me hope is that God is sovereign. There are times in history where things looked very, very bleak. I think in the early 1700s in England, it looked very bleak. You had the slave trade, the Atlantic slave trade, and really slaves worldwide was something that just didn't look like it would ever go away. And you had people like William Wilberforce, who stepped up and for 20-something years fought and fought and fought. And then eventually, right before he died, was able to be successful in stopping the slave trade in England. Yeah. And so God will choose what happens to our country at the end of the day. We're called to be faithful in the spheres that we're in, for the people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. And if we do that, if we take those tasks that God's put in front of us each day, He is sovereign about the result, and He knows what the result's going to be, and we know that He wins in the end. But we don't have to worry. We don't have to worry about. We should worry in the sense that we need to do our part, but we don't have to fret. We don't have to fret about the end result.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about doing our part, because it's not enough to be a bystander as an American, but we do have to stand out and also stand apart from other people. And the challenge becomes is not doing what everybody else is doing, and following Christ through it all. There's tremendous temptation because of the pervasiveness of social media in the society today to be like other people, to be like everybody else, and to follow whatever the loudest noise is, and we're called to not be that. We're called to follow Jesus. And you've done that. You've done that in your personal life, and you're doing that in your law life now. You could be at any law firm you wanted to be at, a partner at a law firm, and you could make tons and tons of money. But you're doing this, which is so important, which is God's work, and a ministry of sorts, isn't that?
Yeah, I started out in a big law firm in Pittsburgh, and the pay is very, very nice in those kind of places. But I'll tell you that we need people in all those areas. We need people working in big firms and small firms and working for businesses. Everybody has a part, and so I would never want to say that what I do is some special position. But one of the things that I see a lot is that it's very easy to speak up about the things that the world will agree with us on. Yeah. Right? If you get up from the pulpit today and you say we're against slavery, well, that's great. That's wonderful, and we are. If we're against sex trafficking, yep, we're all on board. But when you start talking, if you said that at 1830. In 1830 in South Carolina, well, then you're going to get the pastor, why are you being political type questions, right? And so we know that God is the same yesterday and today and forever. And so what becomes political might change from decade to decade or century to century. But as Christians, as believers, we shouldn't be putting our finger up and deciding that we're not going to speak about biblical issues merely based on which way the winds are blowing. And so that's the struggle that I think we have today, both in the legal realm and the political realm, and in the social realm. Just even in the workplace or in our churches, we need to be able to talk about these issues that sometimes are labeled political, sometimes aren't, but we're going to talk about these cultural issues in a biblical way, and ultimately knowing that these people on the other sides of the issues from us, or they may not understand, they may have animosity, but they're a child of God. And we want to love them just the same as we talk about truth.
You're saying the right thing. The truth is more than about being liked. Right. So much of what we do on social media is with an eye toward getting likes. Like you put a picture on your social media feed, and you see how many people liked it. And how many friends do you have? How many followers do you have? We do things with an eye toward that. But following Jesus isn't always about being liked, because he wasn't very well liked. Right.
Yeah, we were promised that if they hated the master, they're going to hate us too. And that's one of the things I like to tell, especially my pastors from growing up. I thought we did a really good job of teaching, and churches still do a good job of teaching, that we need to preach the truth and do it loving. But we sometimes miss out on that next part. It's really nice to follow that up with, but remember, you may speak the truth with love, but people are still going to hate you for it sometimes.
That's right.
Doesn't mean that we shouldn't always find ways to improve the way that we're loving, because we're not perfect, but we're going to get accused of that at times.
Yeah, amen, brother. Well, if you're interested in the work Jeremy and the Independence Law Center are doing, or want to support their work, visit their website at independencelawcenter.org. It's been a privilege getting to know Jeremy and to see how God is using him inside and outside the courtroom. I'll be right back with our great producer, Jeff Coleman, for closing thoughts.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
So now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
I love the conversation. I think when Jeremy talks about William Wilberforce, that great parliamentarian who made it his life's mission, after a point of decision and conversion to the idea that life was more than the party and the fun and the pursuit of power, to make it a mission to abolish the slave trade. My son and I were in Westminster Abbey recently, and you go in for morning prayer at 7:30 in the morning, and you're walking down, really maybe a dozen people that go into Westminster Abbey in the morning, but William Wilberforce's statue is there on the way in. You're walking over Darwin and past kings and composers, and there's William Wilberforce. And on the way out one morning, I looked over, and there's a long kind of epitaph tribute to William Wilberforce. And the language that stood out to me is, he relied not in vain on God. So it talks about the abolition of the slave trade, but then said fully, like Jeremy was saying, we rely on the outcome completely on God. It's not on us. So you just wake up in the morning not knowing the fruits of what you do, be faithful. And I think Jeremy's message to all the moms and grandparents and business owners who feel so frustrated they want to give up is just do the next thing, do the next right thing. And there will be allies and people that in the moment when you need help will be there. And we don't know what the outcome of these great fights are.
Yeah, but he's not afraid to not be popular. That's the wonderful thing. And that's so Christ-like, because the temptation for most of us is to be like everybody else and to be liked.
Yeah, just to do enough courage and then leverage the rest of your skill set to make a lot of money so you can retire comfortably. I mean, that is the American dream model, right. And especially when it comes to attorneys, litigators, that's been the model, generally speaking, to say this is a good way to land and retire well. That's not his pursuit.
Yeah, what a blessing, what a blessing. For some, practicing law might be a ticket to a lifestyle and fame and front pages, but for people like Jeremy, it's a calling. What talent and skill do you have that you might be willing to ask God to use for His service? Is there anything you're holding back? I hope tonight's guest encouraged you to trust God with everything, especially your gifts. Take 30 seconds if you can, right now, to visit our website at joewatkins.org. Let me know how Jeremy's life and witness gave you hope. For Jeff Coleman and the entire production team here at Lighthouse TV, thank you for welcoming us into your home. For America's first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. Thanks so much for watching. God willing, I'll see you next week. What a good heart he has. It's the right heart.
And to know that he's there when you need him.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people there who are facing decision points. Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.